Hey, this is Kevin from Kevin's Barbecue Joints, and this one is just awesome. It's with Rick from Tropical Smokehouse in West Palm Beach, Florida. We talked for over an hour, so I'm going to make this short and sweet. It is so spectacular. There are so many nuggets that I learned about him, about his mindset. We talk about his fine dining career, we talk about opening Tropical, and then we talk about their second restaurant. And then we talk about a third one that's coming up. But along the way, you really get great insight into what he's thinking. Sit back, relax, enjoy this. I can't thank him enough for taking the time. He's a busy guy. His restaurant, I guarantee you after listening to this, you're going to want to put it on your list to visit because it sounds so spectacular. So many different things I want to try. So many unique items. So be sure to stay safe and visit your local barbecue joint. Because you're obviously, your menu is chock full of things that aren't on a normal Texas barbecue joint, and then it's also
Yeah,
it's South Florida barbecue. You're creating or leaning into a style. So this is great. This is us, Rick. Thank you for this so much for taking the time. I really appreciate
yeah.
it.
I mean, I feel like we're among good company in your podcast. I've probably seen, I don't know, probably only like about a dozen that I've watched, but I mean, like, I feel like every time that I am able to take time, you don't just learn about the food side of things. You kind of learn what makes people tick, and that's
Mhm.
what I like about what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that because I've had comments people say like talk about barbecue. Don't talk about I'm like, well, that's for me it's the people I want to learn how
Right.
you and also what I hopefully try to do and I get responses sometimes that indicate that's what I'm doing is people say, I've learned that, this guy was an accountant and now he's just doing barbecue or now like it's so like you have a more culinary path, but there's people that it's amazing how people have just dropped into this and had success. It's wild.
I think barbecue is wildly eclectic, and that's one of the things that I love about it. You
Yeah.
know, I guess for my resume, it's a little bit heavy on the culinary side, as you said, but I mean, that's helped me along the way to just have a little bit more of like a creative latitude, and like you said, to kind of like express what I see as the sense of place here in South Florida. That's really for me. I'm starting to chronicle some of these things into writing because I feel like I actually have something that's worth sharing with people at large. But when I was a chef, and by was a chef, I mean when I was actively working as executive chef at Cafe Blue in Palm Beach, I traveled to Tokyo, and while I was there on a food trip that Chef Danielle had arranged through Saori,
Oh,
she runs a kind of cultural exchange program called the Gohan Society, and she takes chefs from New York and sends them to Tokyo, and brings chefs from Tokyo to New York. And she'd done this with a bunch of people, and Danielle had been involved before, and she reached out and said, "Hey, I'd like to ask that you recruit someone to go on this trip." So I was at work one day at Cafe Blue in Palm Beach, and Danielle called me from New York and said, "Hey, can you make some time to go to Japan?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think I can figure that out, chef." So I was trying to play it cool, but I was super excited that he even considered me for that. But there was a trip that had been organized and was sponsored by QP Mayonnaise.
ah,
So they were kind of hosting and part of it, just as far as like the exchange of information and just, a really interesting trip that was put together by a lot of very thoughtful people that I just happened to be a part of, and more or less just lucky because of proximity. So I end up in Tokyo. It was like I was there for like 10 days. It was like a week long itinerary, and I stayed for a couple days just independently. At the end of my stay, I was speaking to a friend back home who was one of my culinary mentors through school and was basically my first boss out of school. His name is Keith Schroeder, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got a buddy that is an author, and he's just happened to be holed up in Tokyo finishing a book that he's been working on. And I think you guys are kind of close. You guys should go out and get a drink." And so basically, I got set up on a blind date with a guy named Scott Mowbray, I believe is his last name. Sorry, Scott, if I butchered that. And we met at izakaya and just had simple food and sake and just kind of like happy to be there and be around another American. And not feel awkward for a brief moment, have a meal together. And I was kind of, just running through, just rapid fire, like the whole experience for me, what it had meant and the impact. And, the biggest takeaway for me was that I felt like the reverence and the significance of everything was just on a different level in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The food that they did, even simple food, was done with just a high degree of precision and reverence and specialization. Like the places go very hard in one direction. Like they do only okonomiyaki,
I was gonna
or
say Okonomiyaki.
only gyoza, or only
Yeah.
like just something like only cooking.
Takoyaki or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
They just really really get it dialed on one thing, and it's like it's really inspiring to see that. And it's also interesting to see a culture that is in favor of that, because I feel like we're a little bit on the inverse of that, where we want variety and efficiency. And so, like, we're always willing to compromise on quality for the sake of those two things. We want it fast or cheap, meaning efficient, and we want variety, meaning like we want to have like Italian and Japanese and all these different things all in one menu.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of just giving it to him like stream of consciousness, just like I am now. And I said, it's just like we don't have that in the US, and we are a huge country. Everything is largely homogenous throughout. Everybody's kind of running really hard in the same direction. Everybody does work really hard, but I think that we fail to define ourselves, and we fail to have specificity and a sense of place about our work. And regional specialization in Europe, for example, like is a huge thing, because that was all just developed as a cottage industry before the Industrial Revolution and shipping and all of that. We happen to be a very young nation at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, meaning that like we were growing fast, we were learning how to move things around the country, and so basically, not only did we do our best to get it all set up as quickly as possible, but we got everything done cheaply, and we're able to just go about our business, and because of that, we kind of forewent the opportunity to have all these little beautiful things that dot the landscape and are unique. And I think that you have to really be diligent to go back and kind of observe what is there, and also then to recognize it. And you have to be really intentional to build upon that in a way that we're contributing to that in the right direction.
Wow.
And so
that's an
this was
epiphany.
kind of an epiphany that I had late night, and like we're talking about all these things, and I was more or less complaining about what we suffered from a lack of, and Scott said, "Well, isn't that your job?" And I was like, just kind of like, I was kind of like stopped in my tracks by that, because I was looking at it as a missed opportunity, or things that we didn't have or lacked, or didn't really, seem as interesting or unique or as significant. And he reminded me that like I do have an impact on that, and that I have an opportunity to actually contribute something that's bigger than Rick. And so I came back to Palm Beach, working in a French kitchen. I worked for Daniel also at the Wynn, his first Las Vegas restaurant, Daniel Boulud Brasserie. We achieved 1 Michelin star there. That was a busy restaurant, 400-seat restaurant. We did huge volume and still achieved a star while I was there. I was at Cafe in Palm Beach for 8 years, and I felt like I had become the technician that I had set out to become. I felt like I had become the leader that I had set out to become, but I felt like I had yet to embark on my own path. And so after, a lot of consideration, it was like, well, I want to do something that, is going to be my forever plan. And therefore I want to do something that's, American. When you say that word, ultimately it kind of narrows it down, because barbecue is kind of the distinctly American thing.
Without a doubt.
A lot of other things you could argue have American influence, but as far as like what is born of the New World, I think that's barbecue for sure. so I kind of knew that, and I didn't really have a barbecue upbringing. I'm from Northern Ohio. Like I probably ate more barbecue out of a crock pot than out of a smokehouse as a kid. And
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
I really just had more ideas than I had actual exposure or experience. And so right around the same time frame, I was working with Felix Flores at the time. He was with Black Hill Meats. He has his own operation now called Cherry Block. Um, Felix was sending us pigs down to Palm Beach to make charcuterie with, and so we had a relationship. And he said, "Hey, there's this really cool event going on called the Butcher's Ball. It's up in Brenham outside of Houston. Very cool. It's in the country. Going to be a lot of folks here. Can you come?" So I brought my youngest daughter, and we went to the Butcher's Ball. Landed in Houston. First stop was Killins. Then the next day we drove up to Brenham. Checked in with the people that were doing the event. They were doing setup the day before. They said, "Definitely, you're in Brenham. You got to go to Truth." And at that time, like, I think maybe I had seen Truth, but I had no idea what their level was really. And so Jess said, like, go to see my friend Leonard. And so we went the next morning and got there early. There was a few people ahead of us. We did the whole thing, wait in line. And we got inside of that little restaurant there. And the whole experience outside of the restaurant was, what I expected. Quaint, roadside, the smoker was out front. Free Lone Star beer, all the stuff that I kind of like knew I was in for. But then once I got inside and realized, the scale of it was kind of tiny, and in a good way. And then I also realized that like the team was also small, and Leonard cut our meat, and I just said, "Hey, we're just visiting from out of town. Just want to stop by, eat your food, and introduce myself." His family was also there working. I think his dad rang us up. I bought a shirt for my wife. Leonard's dad gave one to my daughter. So like the hospitality was like off the charts. The food was what kind of, sealed the deal for me. Like I had never seen such craftsmanship with food that is known as kind of humble food. His precision and execution and the dedication that it takes to actually do that, the way that he was doing it at the time. I know that he's grown some and things change when you grow, but his original location, I believe, is still, true to that form. So basically the guy's staying up all night and like cooking for you. And then like, he's like basically, like trying to stay awake while he's cutting all this meat that he's been up all night cooking. And it was also good. I worked throughout the country. I've worked, around the best talent in the world, in the upper echelons of the industry. I've worked, in private venues. I've worked in Michelin venues. Leonard has a gift, and the work that he put forth on our plate that day, it was all that it took. I was like, okay, I didn't know barbecue could be this good. Now I know that I have something that has momentum to it, because if I can apply my skill set to food like this, and I can also tell a story of, South Florida and what all of the influences here are, and create a menu with a sense of place that when you read the menu, you're like, oh, this sounds like it's a different kind of barbecue. I kind of had my marching orders from that point. I knew exactly kind of the direction, and I knew the vibes on the food side, still like gives me, goosebumps to this day to talk about that meal at Truth, because out of all of the things I've done, I think that is probably in the three most impactful meals that I've ever had.
That's
Which, like it blows me away to sit here and say it out loud, because like I've been around.
no, you have.
Like last year for our 20th wedding anniversary, we ate in a 3-star, and like I was enjoying the food, and the chef was amazing, incredibly hospitable, took us through the kitchen. They're doing amazing things there, and I enjoyed the meal immensely. It was flawless. But there was just something about that meal that we had in Brenham, Texas, that just had so much soul to it, along with how skillfully it was prepared, that it really resonated with me a lot. So we, just kind of embarked on this path. I knew that I wasn't going to stay at Cafe for forever. It's a hotel restaurant, so that's 21 services a week. It never closes, holidays and all that. And I kind of decided I liked Florida, like a few years prior to that. I was like, I don't really want to chase another job somewhere else. So, like at that point, it really started to come together. Jason Lakehow, who's my business partner with Tropical, was previously our general manager at Cafe, and he had left and opened a spot called Maisie's that was doing New World comfort food with a local chef. And they were well received, but I think they were a little ahead of their time, and it was difficult for them to do the turns that they needed to do, especially when people want to eat at 7:30. That kind of puts you in a bad position, because you need to fill early and need to fill late to make the math work. And
Yeah.
you can do one big seating, but you might not make ends meet with
You
just
gotta be able
that.
to turn the tables, yeah.
They were in a position where they had kind of, rounded the bend in year two, and were ready to make some hard decisions when the pandemic occurred. And that was a crazy time, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, but basically,
No.
long story short, like I laid off 100 people at Cafe. I stayed on with 3 other managers as core staff because of it being in a hotel. We had critical lodgers there, so there were pilots, doctors, like there were people that needed our services, so we did stay open. As we started to kind of work our way out of that, we were doing like drive-through in the valet. So like, a Bentley would pull up and the valet would run out and throw lamb chops in their trunk, and they would take off with the mask on driving. And that, it was like crazy. And so like all of this was happening. And I was like, I know I was motivated to do my thing, but like that was kind of like the catalyst of it all. I was like, I gotta go. And it wasn't for any reason other than like I just felt like the sense of urgency had built to that level. It was just like, it was past time for us to do that. So Jason and I got together and worked out a plan, because they had closed Maisie's temporarily because of all of those circumstances. We worked out a plan that I was going to work with him to kind of start programming Tropical and get that queued up, and I would work through December of 2020 at Cafe, and then I would open Tropical in January of 2021, on the other side of the bridge. So basically in like 3 weeks time, I finished one job and opened the restaurant. And, in spite of all of those issues with COVID, like we were immediately busy.
Wow.
And immediately busy in a way that we didn't really expect. We had a couple rough services, like I had a couple in particular where I had people in the room that were friends and guests of mine, and things kind of went sideways. And that's always an awkward feeling for everybody, because, like you're just like trying to like be proud of the thing and it gets out of hand. And we worked through that very quickly and got our footing. We worked through the first year of Tropical's life. The summer was not good to us. I knew, being a hotel chef on the island, that if you can't win with the neighborhood in the summer, you can't win at all. It's simply too difficult. You can make money in the season, but in the summer, if you're not actually viable, you lose too much money in that off season. And so we knew that we needed to do some things to tap into our neighborhood. And, Jason went to Cornell for hospitality, and he's like, I would never say this, but I think we need to take out an ad on the country radio station. And I was like, well, okay, I'm not opposed to it. So we started with me going into the sound booth with the engineer and recording some commercials. And I do my best work behind the stove, so I was never like particularly pleased with these commercials, but they were airing and people were hearing them and coming in, and like I would be outside putting wood in the smoker, and somebody would roll up and be like, I heard about you on the radio, man. I am here for some barbecue. And like, it just kind of started to build a little
That is
momentum.
awesome. That's so funny.
And we still work with WIRK to this day, except thankfully, thank God, it worked out so well
Mm.
that their DJ does an endorsement for us instead of me trying to get on the air and talk it up. Nick Rivers is an amazing DJ and an amazing guy. He comes into the restaurant, huge supporter of Tropical, but he just like drops it in there when he's doing his normal programming, and it'll be like, so smooth, and so we're still going on that. But in the midst of the second year of Tropical, we started to really get some recognition that put us on a different trajectory as well. So, Southern Living started to notice us. James Beard Foundation started to notice us, and like the second year of Tropical's life was like this amazing like time where I got JBF nom for Best Chef South. Tropical got included for Best Barbecue in Florida, plus Best Locally Owned Restaurant in Florida by Southern Living. And like all of these things that just kind of culminated into us becoming like a very busy restaurant, especially in the summer. Then that kind of just brought us up to the level where we felt like this is sustainable. We brought something to the table that the people actually are embracing in a way. It's resonating with people that, there's plenty of barbecue here. Like there isn't Florida barbecue, but there's like, plenty of Florida owned barbecue, even like, PA barbecue is a Florida thing. Sonny's barbecue is a Florida thing.
Mm-hmm.
To liken that to something in terms of Texas, it's probably like chain barbecue, like I don't know, Rudy's
Like
or
Rudy's,
something like
maybe, yeah.
that. So locally, there was just like a lot of commodity barbecue that people would. At times they would liken us to. There's a particularly famous bar restaurant package store combo called Flanagan's that is an institution here in Florida, and they do baby back ribs. Baby back ribs. They're super cheap. Their sauce is awesome. I don't think that they actually run smokers. I think that they're figuring it out some other way, but like people would come into our restaurant and be like, why are your ribs expensive? And it was like, well, at the time we were buying from Meyer Natural. We still buy from Compart. We have worked with Cheshire. Like we were buying pork that was the same quality that I was purchasing in fine dining kitchens my whole career. It's hard to make money that way. And so like having that conversation never really went down well with people. So we had a whole period of co-creation in the beginning of Tropical that was like I had to allow some changes that maybe weren't consistent with my creative vision, but were very necessary for the viability of the restaurant. So, for example, we didn't have brisket. We didn't have brisket on the opening menu. I have no claim to brisket as far as like. I've not worked in a proper barbecue to learn that technique. I'm self-taught on brisket. We figured it out. I think we do okay. We buy good meat. We take our time with it, and we do a barbecue that has Cuban coffee in it, and like that's kind of like our spin on that. We didn't even have ribs really on our opening menu. Then we started baby backs, but they were very expensive. They're like $9 a pound at the height of all of that, like global milk pricing. And so like I was paying, $27 for a half a rack of these beautiful Meyer Natural back ribs and trying to sell them and money, and it just didn't make sense. So we ultimately switched to spares, which I think there's just as many places doing spare ribs here in South Florida as baby backs, but baby backs are more prominent in like all of the bar restaurant scene that you go to, like popular price restaurants, like they all do back ribs, and like they're tiny. They're like pound and a half racks of ribs. So you get the whole rack for $19.99 with your dinner fixings and everything. And we can never compete with that. It doesn't even make sense to try. So like
So,
we kept the kind of a la carte style menu that you would see in like a Texas barbecue. We started adding things like, combos with like a lunch plate with like a smaller portion of smoked meat and the side. We've had fish and chicken and turkey and all of those things on the menu, that kind of gives us our unique spin on things. But the sides also really differentiate us a
yeah.
lot. So like we have yuca, plantains, black beans, yellow rice. Like we have kind of that Caribbean or Latin Caribbean vibe that, is prevalent down here with all of the, especially Cuban restaurants here around us. We've played around with an awful lot of things just in terms of specials like grouper curries, cobia wings, like a lot of fish and spiny lobster. Like
Oh,
we've done like kind of things that a barbecue restaurant has no business doing, but like I'm fine to do it because like I can cook or whatever. But what it did was just allow us to occupy this space that was, more than just the usual greatest hits of barbecue menus that really kind of dominate. And so that kind of accomplished our goals there. The thing that really kind of keeps us going to this day, though, and I always need to acknowledge it, is that I lived in the neighborhood for, like 8 years before we opened Tropical. I moved out west and bought a home out west because it was more affordable. So I had known the neighborhood very well and lived there for a very long time. And I knew that nobody really had a great burger. And for whatever reason, maybe it's traffic counts, maybe it's regulatory, I don't know, but there's just no fast food in this neighborhood.
huh.
So I was like, we're going to do a burger, so like we have a great burger and it has been at the top of our P mix since we opened the doors of Tropical.
Hey.
By the numbers, we sell more burgers than anything by unit. Dollars, we probably sell a lot more barbecue because, brisket and ribs and all that, like it does get the average up. But the burger customer and the repeat on that definitely has been a critical component to us being an accessible neighborhood restaurant with come often prices. That's something that I think that you really have to be very grounded these days with food if you're going to last, because everybody is trying to claw their way to the top of the heap in terms of quality. To have staying power, though, you have to have something that is a bit more utilitarian to the customer. And
Well, and it's nice that you are able enough. I don't think it's humility, but you have the wherewithal enough to realize that it's okay to do that, because
yeah,
I think there's a lot of people that have pride and they'll dig their feet in and say, I'm not going to do this because of this. And I feel like that's foolish in a way, because you want to survive as a restaurant. And it also, they might come in for the burger, but then they opt to, try their sides or try something else that.
right. We say plenty of football games have been won by the kicker.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, but then if the kicker doesn't make it, then everyone puts all the pressure on them when they were losing
The unsung hero. But
I agree. No,
I
I agree.
think that that's something that, again, like that's just me making an assessment of the neighborhood because I lived there.
Yeah.
I was like, just nobody does a good burger. We're gonna do it. And I had no idea what that meant. And now we're doing on the weekends, some days, 200 burgers.
Right amount. That's a good
And
amount.
so that's pressure, so it's good because the burger in terms of its logistics are far more streamlined than barbecue can ever achieve.
Mhm.
So like that's good, and it gives us like a bigger footprint. It's like back to the variety thing, and like so like we're super happy with what we've been able to achieve there. We have kind of tried to send out some feelers in terms of how replicable or scalable our brand is. So we opened a quick service concept in downtown West Palm last year. It's been open a little over a year now.
Yeah, I was curious about that. That was called something market or something, you can
Barbecue market, yeah, tropical barbecue market, and the biggest difference, and the only difference really, is that we don't do burgers there because that kitchen has only a cooler and a smoker. It's got a big work table and a mixer. That's the whole kitchen.
Wow.
There isn't a hood, there isn't a fryer, there isn't a grill, a griddle, nothing. So like when we built that, it was in a space that was occupied by a little day cafe that are they're neighbors of ours. Aioli, Mike and Melanie have been in business down the street from us on Dixie for 10 years now, and super amazing couple, super hardworking, built their business, like independently, raised their kids, at the same time, like super proud to even know them and work and collaborate with them, be friends with them. But they had set up down there, and they were on a 5-year lease that kind of came to the end of its term during the pandemic, and they just kind of like made a strategic exit at that point and left the space. And so we were like, okay, we could take this over and just rework the counter basically and see how this works, see what kind of traction we get, see if we can commit to a concept that is barbecue only. We do take a lot of heat for that. I think that if we were doing it again, we're a little weaker and wiser than we were 1 year ago. And, we might find ways to be a little bit more creative with the menu, because although our barbecue has gotten plenty of accolades and I stand behind it, I think that the overall consensus is that the restaurant is a little serious and our other restaurant is more fun because they've got cheeseburgers. So, that's something that I think is that simple. But in people's minds, I think that, it's okay to be simple with the way you look at your food, especially the restaurants are 3 miles apart. So people walk in, they're like, do you got burgers? No. What about fries? No. Do you got mac and cheese? Well, no, we don't have that stuff. That's at our other restaurant. So like we're diverting traffic to our other restaurant and like trying to figure out how to be, a good restaurant that's useful to the commuting and working community that's right downtown West Palm. And so like that food is very streamlined in terms of, like we have all of the smoked meats. We don't do fish there either, but we do brisket, mojo pork, jerk turkey, chicken, and smoked jackfruit. And then we do kind of the same type of sides. So we do like coconut peas, Carolina gold rice. Then we do black beans, yellow rice. We do plantains and sweet potatoes in the smoker. We do our cornbread, and we do some desserts there. So like it's kind of like an abbreviated menu, but still in the same spirit of tropical. And I wish that we were busier there. I'm very grateful for the business that we do have, but I think that market is just, it's fundamentally different than our other neighborhood, because that neighborhood is residential. So people are like actually like, coming home or they're working, thereabouts on their lunch break. And then, downtown, the people are kind of rushing into work in the morning. They take a brief break and then they get out of that neighborhood to go home. So, we're working on ways that we can kind of just be more useful in that context, grab and go, retail products, packaged goods, all of those things, and just try to grow the offering there. We had a recent opportunity because of that counter service model. We had a recent opportunity to do a pop-up at Palm Beach Atlantic University.
I think I saw a photo of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the food service operator, Aramark, reached out to us and said, hey, we have this local restaurant row opportunity, and we have kind of like a satellite station outside of the main dining hall, and we would like to see if you guys can do a pop-up here. And obviously we don't have smokers and all that, so like we'll figure out how to handle that logistically and with the health inspector to be able to bring food from the smoker downtown and serve it for lunch. And so we just started that. That's just, for us, it's like, it's a great challenge. It's great to work with such a big company and kind of see how they operate and learn and learn how to like class up from what we're used to as independent operators. Like we fielded a request for a proposal for Palm Beach International Airport recently as well. And it's like, we don't really have any reason to be a one and done restaurant. And we don't really have any motivation to be a cookie cutter chain restaurant. So like the more that we can become kind of interwoven into, Palm Beach County, if we're in the college, the airport, downtown, Dixie Highway, like I feel like, we're right here in our place where our people are, and like the more that we can do to just create more of a footprint and continue to generate impressions and start to, gain momentum. That I think is all very good synergy for the original location in particular. Is just still getting busier. There's been multiple new barbecue concepts come to light since we opened. We kind of were scared in the beginning. We're like, oh no, people are gonna try to open a barbecue joint, and oh, what if they steal our customers? And then like what we came to realize was like, well, first of all, the more barbecue in the neighborhood, the more the neighborhood becomes a barbecue destination.
Hmm.
Second of all, I kind of like our position within the context of these other joints. I'm okay with a little friendly competition.
Yeah.
And I think that we do well enough and we have enough really effective points of differentiation that we've actually risen, more than we should have due to competition. So, like that's all kind of like, just indicators that we're doing something right.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it actually, I've heard many times across the country when people, they start to get worried that another barbecue place is opening, but then there is that healthy competition. There's also, yeah,
Yeah.
making a place a destination, that does help because can you explain a little too? Because because Florida's vast, pretty vast. And where are you located? Where is West Palm Beach? Can you describe West Palm Beach for people? And then I know that I had read something because you were talking about your legacy as a chef. Do you feel like you're now fulfilling that legacy or you're going closer
Yeah.
towards that?
Well, let's unpack that in two parts. Palm Beach is closer to Miami than it is to Orlando, which are pretty much the only two things that people from outside of Florida recognize.
It's true.
We're about an hour and a half north of Miami on the East Coast.
Mhm.
We're about an hour away from Lake Okeechobee and 2 hours away from Orlando. So that's kind of, for me, it's like I don't think you could have a better
Yeah.
balance there because we have the beach, we have Miami, we have the whole Everglades. My shirt that I'm wearing, Python Cowboy, my buddy Mike Kimmel is an outfitter and a dog guide, and he runs hunts for pythons, iguanas,
Oh, wow.
or all that stuff. Like Florida is a dynamic, wildly dynamic place. 500 years of cultural fusion. You have an ecosystem here that has like the extremes of North America. So like we have coast, we have freshwater lake, we have the glades, we have Central Florida, which is amazing, incredibly dense oak forest. It's amazing here.
Yeah.
I've lived in Wyoming, California, Nevada, Vermont, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee. Like I've lived all over the country. I've traveled even more extensively. And like this place was the one that I got here and I was like, this is the craziest, wildest place ever. Like where else can you go and like be afraid of getting attacked by sharks while you're swimming and then drive an hour in the other direction and be afraid that you're going to get eaten by alligators?
Nowhere.
Or now it's pythons, like, and so like for me, I grew up in the, rural part of Northern Ohio, like I said, on a small farm, but like, we'd be like out playing in the creek, catching crawfish and stuff like that. It wasn't like there was anything actually like dangerous, just
Maybe
everything.
fire ants or something.
Yeah, everything back home is like very tame compared to what's down here. So
Yeah.
in terms of where we're at in Florida, we're definitely part of Southern Florida and we are on the Atlantic coast. So,
Mhm.
A lot of different influences here, especially because of Miami. A lot of people, this is kind of their point of origin for a lot of different food cultures and amazing ingredients and like stuff that has all of these ties to faraway places, whether it's Afro-Caribbean, Indian via Trinidad. Like there's like all these amazing people here and amazing chefs and small independent restaurants and just like a really inspiring place here that isn't really dominated too much by commercial culture and isn't really like dominated too heavily by any one culture in particular, frankly. Like I think that that's kind of like the good of it, is that it's multicultural here. It's kind of wild, and it's a fun mix of, it's a mashup that like I think has some of the best food. Like we frequent restaurants that, like I don't think that people from outside of the area would even understand what we're doing, but like my wife and I go and eat doubles. It's like a Trini like street food that's basically like fried bread with curry chickpeas and the hottest hot sauce you've ever had. And it's like literally the most craveable thing that you can imagine. And this lovely woman named Brenda has this restaurant called Curry Tabanca that's here in Palm Beach County, and we like to go and visit with her. And she's came to Tropical, and like, all of those connections just kind of like, make it as colorful as it is, and make it such a joy to be a part of the scene here. Getting back to the second half of the question, because that was the more significant half, was my legacy as a chef. I'm just a guy, like I'm living the life that I probably don't deserve. I did something right along the way. I did apply myself and work diligently for 2 decades in the industry. I used that as a platform to have a creative voice that gave birth to this concept that now people have rallied around, and we have a tremendous amount of support. Like almost like some people are like, you have like a cult-like following. And I don't really like the sound of that, but the reality of it is like we're doing so well. I deny that. We're doing extremely well, and in general, it is hard. It's a hard climate for operators throughout the country. Here in South Florida, this was like, they called this summer like restaurant Armageddon, because it's like things are just like all of the key metrics are kind of stacked against you right now. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but like basically, long story short, the thing that's hurting people the most in our market is rent increases.
Yeah.
People still want to eat out. People do have limits with their personal finances, so you have to be able to meet them in the middle somewhere. And what the unfortunate circumstance is that a lot of restaurants are faced with rent increases that are just, they're insurmountable. So, they have 2 choices, like raise prices or move or close. So there's a lot of kind of like that climate. For some reason, this summer in particular, people didn't seem to have a lot of good to say. That's not to say everyone. Some of our neighbors and friends have had great summers, like Mike and Melanie at Aioli. They've had a great summer. Chef Clay Conley has a bunch of restaurants here in West Palm and Palm Beach. He has one that's on Dixie Highway up from Tropical called Grotto. It's an Italian kitchen with a beautiful wood oven. And they have a little sandwich shop that they have a walk-up window on the side of their building. And like, they killed it this summer. Like, I think the more approachable the food is, the better. I think the better the chef is making the best chef making the most approachable food seems to be winning, and I think that that's something that everyone should take note of, because, like, don't overplay your hand, and definitely please understand that like there is a lot more people out there looking for a everyday meal than they are looking for a special occasion,
That's great. No, that's great advice. Really great advice.
So to your point about my legacy, Florida barbecue is not something of my invention. I feel like my work has done something to contribute to a dialogue that will last longer than my work, and I think that that's satisfying to know that, like I was able to use all of my knowledge and experience to just say like, hey, not in the sense of Texas. We're not going to go there, but like barbecue does have a story. What makes the best barbecue, generally speaking, is the culture of people that have perpetuated it in a place. Yeah. Like you go all the way up to Hemingway and eat at Scott's, and you're like, well, I get it now. Yeah. I don't see why everybody's trying to cook whole hog, but I get why this is here for all this time. Ditto for the brisket. The first bite of brisket I had was at Killen's in Pearland, Texas, and I was like, I thought brisket was smoky, you know. And it's like there's so many kind of
Yes.
preconceived notions about barbecue, and when you have places that are just calling themselves barbecue and are trying to do all of the regional specialties at once, I think that that's the recipe for a lot of mediocre food.
Hmm.
And so what does it mean that we're Florida barbecue? It means that like we're going to lean into smoked fish. We're going to lean into all of our influences here in South Florida when it comes to our creativity. And because we use the word barbecue, we're going to do those familiar things like ribs and brisket. And, people basically wanted my head on a pike because I put a sign on the Dixie highway that said BBQ. And they would come in and say, "You don't got brisket?" And I would say, "We don't got brisket." And they said, "This is a barbecue." And I said, "Well, sir, I understand that. And the point being is that, we don't want to deny you anything, but we want to actually be Florida's barbecue."
Hmm.
So, like I said, there was an ongoing dialogue that was, co-creation that kind of pushed us in the right direction. And I think that I had enough willingness and openness to that to be able to bring it together in a way that we didn't lose too much of the initial DNA of Tropical. I think that that was the important thing, was that you know we can do a lot. We can cover a lot of ground. We have an amazing group, a core group of talent that is incredible. So like I'm pretty comfortable to do a lot of things, take a lot of things on, and as long as we're kind of like keeping ourselves in check from time to time and making sure like the phrase on brand, like I don't really like to say that, but
Yeah.
like basically we just want to be weird and keep being weird, and like like it makes people a little uncomfortable, and that's fine. Because in the end they're happy when they try something that they maybe hadn't tried or hadn't
Without a
expected,
doubt.
you know.
Yeah.
And so right on down to like the most casual things. Like we have a crispy fish sandwich that we make a fish patty from mahi. We make it in house,
Ah.
and so we make this fish patty, and then we smoke it. So we have a smoked fish patty, and then we beer batter it and fry it and put it on a Martin's roll with shaved cabbage and really
Oh.
good tartar sauce.
Oh.
And like you could get a fried fish sandwich at Tropical that's like off the charts, and it's not the fish sandwich you've ever had, because it is a formed patty, which is like fast food to the core. But we're hand making that with fresh mahi that we hand cut, and then we take the trim and grind it, and then fold the two together to make this like mosaic of chunky, flaky fish and the seasoned ground fish also. And the way that we handle it is very straightforward, and the way that we present it, it just looks like a plain old fish sandwich, but like it's in the details that I think our food really kind of like sticks the most,
Sounds
and
like it. Is that available every day?
yeah, that's one of our core menu items at Tropical. We're working on a new location in Delray Beach, which is 20 miles south of West Palm,
Okay.
off of the 95. Beautiful beachside town. It doesn't really have the same kind of um, metropolitan vibes as West Palm. Like West Palm has like a lot of it's kind of like the Wall Street of the South, like it's got a lot of big companies here, and a lot of people that drive really nice cars and wear suits to work. And
Yeah.
Delray Beach is kind of like a little bit the opposite of that. Like you can go there and hang out in shorts and flip flops at a pinball museum in downtown Delray.
That's
um,
cool.
it's on I believe it was the Florida's cleanest beach in USA Today. I
Oh.
just read in the past month, like it's a pristine beach. They've done all of the steps to maintain the native mangroves, and like the beach has a very natural aesthetic to it and
Wow.
beautiful sand. And so we're opening a spot on Atlantic, which is the main drag going right to the beach off of the 95, and we'll be opening that next year. It's a little bit of a smaller building than the original spot, but we're going to do our burgers there, and all
Of
of the
course.
other things that have given us so much momentum and such a good following. And we're going to call that one like burgers and barbecue, because the first one was like, we are a barbecue restaurant with a burger problem. So now we're going to kind of lean into it a little bit and say burgers and barbecue, and, just kind of give the people what they want, so to
Mhm.
speak. So,
Wow. So that's next year.
yeah, we're already we're so close to pulling permits for it. I was there. I was in the middle of a woodworking project when you reached out to me today, because I had went and reclaimed all of this rough cut cedar off of the back bar from the previous
Ah,
tenant.
I love that.
I was like I was like so involved in this project. I'm making like a Japanese trellis to go
Cool.
on the patio for our home. Like that place is going to be a good mix of like a small restaurant with a small bar, but a big backyard. So it's got kind of like all the feels of a good barbecue joint. Like it's kind of a simple salt block building. It's 1,500 square
Oh,
feet. It's like a perfect cube, and then the backyard is about equal sized. And so I think because of us being like right on the main thoroughfare there, and having like a nice backyard situation where people can chill and drink beer and like see the smoker and chat with the pitmasters, like I think that's what people are in it for sure. And we're just kind of going to continue on the missive of growing this thing, locally, one step at a time, and see where that takes us. And in terms of what are we aiming to do, or why are we doing it, like it has a lot to do with just sustainability and job creation. And like independent business has to have a certain level at this point to be able to survive the long term.
hmm.
It's very difficult to do mom and pops level businesses in this climate. And so we're kind of like on that path of like seeking to be wildly successful, just because like that is indeed the route to longevity.
I agree. Now,
Yeah.
what are you cooking on? Are you cooking on primitives, or I forget what kind of pits
So
you?
we bought a 500-gallon primitive when we opened Tropical. When the first big Southern Living and James Beard news broke, we literally like broke the restaurant. I had built a cabinet smoker that was actually inside of the restaurant on the hotline. The previous concept was a chef's kitchen that had one of those architectural grills, like the Grillworks
Mm.
Argentine style grill. We had removed that and used that hearth space to put a cabinet smoker to smoke fish. Well, we got so busy with ribs and brisket that the 500 was just like not. I mean, you could run it in 24 hours a day; it still was inadequate. So then we were trying to like cook in this cabinet smoker that I had welded. It has like a small firebox underneath with a diffuser, so the heat coming into the diffuser has this big like 3/4 inch steel I beam to basically just spread the heat out. But
Okay,
that thing
makes
was
sense.
getting super heated, and when the grease was dropping down on it, we got to a flash point a couple times. And so we had a couple fires inside of the kitchen, and they never really spread outside of that smoker, but like we definitely burned the smoker out a couple times. And so then you're scrambling because you're a victim of your own success, and you're like, oh, like we're gonna ruin everything because now we can't even cook. We're so busy, and the food is suffering. So like we tried to just be nimble with that. We got back with Primitive and said, hey, send help. So they started building 1,000-gallon for us. We ultimately only salvaged the situation when we opened Olive last year, because we bought an M&M rotisserie. And that
Smart.
puppy, let me tell you something about like a piece of machinery that is a game changer. It's simply so efficient, not only from a cooking perspective, but from a labor perspective. That one piece of equipment has leveled out a lot of our inconsistencies due to volume.
Wow.
So we can take our time and make the ribs nice in the 1,000-gallon cooker, and cook brisket in the rotisserie, which I know for a purist, especially if you're of Texas descent, that's blasphemous. But I think that these rotisserie cookers are They're definitely making a comeback,
A
but like
lot of folks are getting them. A lot of them.
they've always been around, but god damn it, they're just like they're incredible machines.
Hmm.
They're self-basting. They don't have hot spots. They cook faster. Like they burn less wood. They're costly to buy, but they're wildly less expensive to operate because of labor and wood. You know, so it's like these are things that like I don't really pretend to be like a like hardcore Texas brisket restaurant. So like I'm fine to say that we cook our brisket in that fashion, and I think that there are plenty of other operators that do as
Oh
well.
yeah. There's a guy like what, Patriotic Pig.
Yeah,
They cook they have I think four 2000s. So he's
yeah.
cooking doing
I
13.
mean, I met Justin Wright last year from Arkansas, and
Oh yeah.
he's got like 17 Mobergs, and I'm like, bro, like God bless you. Not only God bless you for keeping Sonny in business, but like God bless you for having enough people to run all those things because it takes a
Yeah.
particular type of person to do that well. And so for us to be able to keep our small team on top of things and just make our product more consistent and reliable ultimately, like that machine has been like the biggest improvement for us. And in terms of our battery of equipment, the next step for us is we want to invest in a direct heat cooker because like I think that there are just certain textures and
Oh yeah.
aromas you can't produce with other equipment that the direct heat cooker can produce. The aroma of direct heat food and the texture of direct heat food are quite unique. I got to travel to Lexington where Snows is.
Yeah.
Robert Jacob Lerma took us kind of behind the scenes at Snows, and we got to meet Carrie and like just amazing people there. But like, wow, like what an operation! Like they have so much going on there. They have a primitive pit, but they also have some like very kind of rustic style direct heat cookers and some
Yeah.
other things, and like
Kind of ragtag. It's amazing.
yeah, but wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Like it's all in the method. It's all in the method.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
I was eating the chicken and I was like, how long does this chicken cook for? And they're like, oh, about 5 hours. And I was like, 5 hours? Like you can't cook chicken for 5 hours. It'll turn to dust. But here it was, and it was incredible, you know.
Yeah, it's
Same
funny.
thing for the brisket. They don't shy away from the fact that they smoke select brisket, but that was brisket that we enjoyed on that trip. And like I do think that there's something about barbecue that transcends all of the material
And the
and
bells and
basically
whistles and everything. Yeah,
it,
no,
it
yeah.
it is a lot about methods. It is a lot about methods, and it is a lot about having a good hand with salt and a good hand with a fire. And if you can manage salt and a fire, your barbecue is going to just automatically be at a level that is kind of hard to compete with.
Hmm.
Like I think that generally the lack of skill in one of those two areas tends to be overcompensated by kind of doing too much or food that doesn't have good balance of flavor. So it's over seasoned, over sauced, over smoked, etc. And I think that just understanding like how precise salt needs to be and how precise fire management needs to be, like that's really, if you're going to learn anything about the business, especially coming from like high-end kitchens in a la carte restaurants, like I kind of know how to cook whatever, but like I don't know anything about barbecue exactly. But I can tell you with great certainty that like it's about salt and it's about fire.
Hmm.
And if you can get those two things right, you don't have to do too much more. Buy good groceries. You know, but like the simple things done right is where you get the best outcomes.
Hmm. Has Danielle had a chance to come visit you?
He definitely paid us a visit. Shortly after we opened, he came around to kick the tires and stoke the fires, and we took some pictures in Chef in his full whites out back by the smoker, and
Oh,
it was
that's
super
hilarious.
windy that day. So like we look like we're in a hurricane, and his apron is like whipping in the wind like Superman
Oh,
cape. Yeah, as chef, I worked for Danielle for the better part of a decade, and what an experience! Tremendously generous as a mentor, tremendously trusting as a boss. I felt like the reason why I was able to be successful under his guidance was that he allowed me to have a sense of ownership of what we did, and
It's huge.
uh, kind of one of those things that it's not what happens when the chef's in the kitchen, it's what happens when the chef isn't in the kitchen that matters. And I think that his reputation is of a significance where you kind of push even harder when he's not there, because you're like, finds out if we screw something up, like, and I'm joking, of course, but the reality of it
No,
is I think that Danielle opened Cafe Blue Palm Beach in 2005, I believe, or 2003.
okay.
Sorry, 2003. They just had their 20th anniversary. It was his first restaurant outside of New York. In the 2 decades since it's been opened, he's opened in all parts of the world. Dubai, Singapore.
I'll show photos from your menu, but one thing that I'm sure people are curious about is the alligator sausage. Can you describe that a little bit? Because it's alligator and pork, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, so sausage was something that we saw as an opportunity to have our kind of signature item with. Alligator was obviously a very common thing in bars here in Florida, but it's more like fried gator bites and things like that. I had been making an andouille style sausage for a very long time. I did it pretty extensively when I was in Tennessee before I came down to Florida and got like a good recipe that I was happy with, that we would make like all different kinds of stuff with like crawfish pies and all that. We would make an andouille out of pork, and so I had a good method, and I was like, okay, obviously we have product utilization that we need to address. We need a signature item that is screaming of Florida, and also like I want something that's like good and different. So we tried to make a gator sausage. It did not turn out very well the very first attempt, because unlike pork, alligator doesn't have the same composition, and it doesn't emulsify very readily.
Makes
So
sense.
we then had to kind of reverse engineer. We had to reverse engineer the formula to where we got a mouthfeel and a texture and that moistness that we needed. We tried pork and gator. It was good, but it kind of was like, I guess it was like you couldn't really, if you ate it side by side with just a pork sausage, pork and alligator are strangely similar.
Interesting.
So you were like, is this gator? And I was like, well, if we want it to have a little bit more toothsomeness to it, I think we need to just work with some of the lean trim from the brisket. So we ended up landing on a ratio of equal parts of alligator and beef and pork.
Oh,
Which gave us the best chew and kept its moisture, and also the gator did kind of hold its own a bit more, because of the fact that I think that you want that, it almost has a texture that has a coarse muscular texture, a coarse musculature to it, to where if you can imagine ground brisket, it's kind of similar to that, where like its coarseness doesn't go away even though it's ground. But we do, like very, straightforward garlic, pepper, paprika, cayenne, bay leaf, like the usual suspects. The original recipe was for ground bay leaves, and like we started making so much of it to grind bay leaves in the blender and all that stuff. I was like, well, maybe we can try some time and like finesse this to where we can get this produced in a little bit less time. So we've amended the recipe a little bit over time, but that's been super popular for us, to the point where we sell enough of it that between the burger and the sausage, we don't really ever have a call to make more styles of sausage.
wow.
If you sell too much brisket, you might have to make more sausage than you care to, and that's kind of one of the curse of brisket success. But our burger does help moderate that. That being said, you can't just turn brisket into burgers. It's far too,
No.
it's far too high in its connective tissue. It makes like a very mealy, sticky kind of consistency. And we do a smash burger, and if you take 100% brisket and smash it on the flat grill, you can't hardly scrape it off to flip it. It's just like has so much connective tissue. It's
Wow.
like glue. And so we do cut into our brisket trim with some short rib to kind of richen it and make it a little bit more manageable. But yeah, the gator sausage is definitely something that we see as our potential first maybe retail offering
Yeah, I was
because
gonna say, yeah, that's a good thing that you
it's a
can.
good niche. It's a good niche product also for
Oh,
that.
heck yeah.
Yeah.
Well, well, Chef, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah,
Yes,
man.
yes, it's been.
Kevin, it's been a year in the making. I'm
I
so
know.
glad that we finally got to connect, brother.
I am so glad, and we'll continue this conversation when I visit. If I can come
Yep.
soon, if not, it'll be spring. But yeah, I just love what you're doing from afar. I appreciate what you're doing from afar, and I'm glad. I can't wait to spread the word further about what you're doing because,
Well, I
uh,
appreciate the interest and the support, and we're looking forward to your visit. If you can time it correctly, in the end of January, we do Smoke and Sunshine,
oh
which
yeah,
is our anniversary party, and some pretty
yeah.
good cooks are going to show out that day. So
I'll try
keep
that.
keep
I'll try
tuned
to
for
I'll try
that.
to come for that because I know I have friends that have come to that. So that's
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
cool,
absolutely. That's a
excellent.
big one for us.
Excellent. We'll have it. I'll put a. I was gonna go over the hours and stuff, but I can get. I'll research all that.
Okay,
I'll put all your hours. I'll put all your social media, all that jazz below. Have a great day,
awesome,
and
man.